I think it's a forgotten battle for many Americans,
Yep.
because we're so divorced from the idea of what Eastern Europe looks like. Because if you're our age, you grew up with the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics,
Right.
and then a bunch of countries that you couldn't name.
Right. Right.
And also, in my opinion, maybe you disagree with this. After the fall of the Soviet Union, or around during the fall, the war in America definitely becomes an internal struggle.
Mm-hmm.
In pop culture, we definitely see it in the music. You know, we're no longer fighting the man, we're fighting ourselves and at best our parents.
Mm, we're not
The
gonna take it
cinema shows
anymore.
it as well. Horror
Yep.
movies, the monsters are kind of gone in the 90s, and now it's
I know what
regular
you
people.
did last summer.
Yeah. It's regular people that are a problem. So I think we definitely lose a bit of a global lens. And also that's coming off of 12 years of GOP hardcore conservative rule
Yeah.
and
I mean,
the 4 years.
someone asked what happened to the peace dividend. You know what? Like they didn't want any Americans to have a piece of that. Like the military industrial complex ramped up again to take the peace dividend away from people. Like there was a moment when we thought we could. I mean, you thought like, okay, we weren't fighting the Cold War anymore, and there could
Mhm.
be a real establishment of social democracy, but it didn't happen. Things just got worse and worse for ordinary people in those.
The idea of the return to the good old days of social democracy was a return to some good old days of American conservatism, and the policies never fit what we were supposed to be returning to during the Reagan 80s, in my opinion.
No, that's true. That's true. But I feel like there were possibility. It was a no. There was a moment when like people were not paying attention to the grab, the money grab that was happening, and the Reagan reevaluation of the tax code
Mm,
really changed everything. And so, Jason, you were like saying, well, why didn't people care about this, and that issue?
mm,
Like, how did that happen? Like, there was a democratic the elected president who, reconfigured capitalism for the very top of the 1%, for the very, very top of the capitalist class. And the other thing I wanted to say about the Yugoslavian war, I know this is getting farther away from trauma, but I want to set the historic. This is why
mhm.
I'm a nerd, and I need to set the historical
Giving some
precedent for the
context.
well.
Yeah.
The context is that the Yugoslavian war was also the Balkan War, if you like, is the first time when the U.S. military outsourced a lot of things to private companies that today are in food services like Aramco and Sodexo.
Mhm.
They wanted to pretend that they were shrinking their budget and making efficiencies happen. And this was really under Clinton. Like all of the U.S. camps, all the U.S. soldiers were fed by private companies, and
Mhm. Still are.
that was an incredible like shift in how America was going to fund the military and wage wars. Like in the first Iraq War, I just moved to or
America.
Orange County, I think, went to America. Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
You know what? Stop, Jason.
I'll
Oh
stop.
my God. Just,
I'll stop.
I'm not going to give you any more Chinese food whenever you you're not good enough for my Chinese food. That's what I'm going to say. Um,
I'm
no,
sorry. I'm sorry. I'll stop.
no, but it's it's this it's this kind of privatization of even like the prosecution of war. So of course it goes along with this sense of that collective change can't take place, and private internal subjective change is what's really really important and privileged. Like privatization, privacy, private life are these like commodified terms that we absorb like in a time like I believe that there are zeitgeist words that people rally around because we're very good at propaganda in the United States. We're very good at branding. And so
Mhm.
this idea of this hyper subjective investigation of the self without it, with this kind of self revealing and sharing and then affirming each other's lived experience, we all become survivors. And that is a really privileged term in this time. And Oprah does that. Oprah privileges that, but within like liberal um, parts of academia, of Cold War academia, this notion of survival and survivorship takes place, especially within trauma studies and Holocaust studies. That there are these people who have survived, and their testimony, they survived unbelievable um, suffering, trauma, the Holocaust. They were dying. That generation was disappearing, and we needed to listen to their testimony. So a lot of the stuff that we use today in some people use in left liberal circles, like "I don't feel seen" or "I hear you" or "lived experience," a lot of that stuff comes from this period of time when liberal academics were saying, like, this is this highest form of ethical political respect for the other, is to understand their survivorship. Now what that assumes too, I was like in the classes with these women, was that um, there were these extraordinary moments of suffering, usually happening in Europe within the Holocaust. And we were all comfortable, like PMC types, and we had to be good listeners. Like that was a great liberal position, because it means you don't really have to take action. It means that you can perform listening in this very particular way. And it also means it's like you don't have to look at history. There is this incredible event, the Holocaust, that beggars the imagination, and then we all just attend to it by listening. This is what a whole school of deconstruction does. I know, like, I tend to get like very, very angry about how my field has evolved and what has paralyzed it, and like most people don't care that much. But it definitely like trickled down. It did trickle down from Yale to like all of these other fields, all of these other schools. It was seen really as prestigious, to talk about trauma in terms of survivorship and testimony and listening and ethics and all this other stuff. So Kathy Caruth and Shoshana Feldman are doing this at Yale, and Oprah is doing this on TV.
Mhm.
And it's all like, and the Soviet Union is falling, and the Cold
Mhm.
War is ending, and we are faced with a new forms of governance that are very, very deep, where the state is deeply coordinated with capital and capitalism's needs to increase the rate of profit. This is where I'm really going nerdy here. But so after the 70s stagflation and all of that worker unrest that had to be disciplined, you have a coordinated state capital action, beginning with Reagan, continuing with Clinton, to um, to increase the rate of profit for a completely financialized economy. And so we're deindustrializing because American capitalists seeking cheaper labor all over the
Mhm.
world. And basically, we are destroying the working class collectively. But we have all these like fancy new ways of talking about healing. And what I also want to say about the mediatic, Oprah's role in all of this is that there there is a collapse of American well-being as America is deindustrializing, and and it starts to happen in the 80s and through the 90s. But this like very publicly branded notion of like a therapeutic language actually inserts itself where actual medical care is being rationed and partitioned and withdrawn from
Mhm.
average Americans. So you have so today, like, you can go online and get like you can get a chatbot, chat GPT bot to be your therapist.
Okay,
God
let
forbid
me
you actually try to get therapy, either through insurance or out of pocket. It's so inaccessible. Like people need therapy.
and let me ask you this. There is becoming an industry right now that's really growing, to your point, because we're suffering more and more. And as we've learned during the pandemic, the state's not going to save us. And
Oh no.
and when you talk about the neoliberalization of healthcare, right? And what you're speaking about is something that I saw really start blowing up within apps, I would say probably like the last 3-4 years, where
Yep.
there's not just self-help apps, but there's literal therapy apps where you're going to get a quote unquote therapist.
Yep.
It's going to talk to you in inverted quotes.
Today's show is brought to you by BetterHelp.
Better health.
Better help.
Sometimes you just feel bad. And, I
Matching
got to
you
pay
up
these
with a
bills.
therapist who's most suited to you, personalizing your mental health
Personalized to
care.
you. So my